Are you curious to know where you can find love on this planet? Where you can find a partner, compatible relationships, colleagues, all kinds of companions and people to partner with in your life? Well, that's the topic of today's Practical Esoteric podcast. This is VerDarLuz from Divine Timing Coaching and Love Lines. This is one of my favorite topics, and it's one of the topics I've gotten asked the most questions about in my 16, 17 years as a locational astrologer since 2006. And it's definitely a topic that I've used in my own life to find relationships, love, compatibility, partnerships, all kinds of relationships that are beneficial. So I want to share this with you today. I think it's one of the most powerful tools we have for understanding how to navigate this planet and be more strategic with where we go and even when we go there, because we can actually look at certain places at certain times and see if we might have a kind of partnership that may be arising or emerging in that location. So this topic, again, is locational astrology. It's also called AstroCartography and astrolocality. And the first thing I want to share with you today is that, you take your birth chart wherever you go, but there are going to be certain places in the world where certain planets or certain parts of your soul are highlighted. So a planet is like a character or an intelligence inside of you. There are some planets that relate more to relationships, and there are also parts of your birth chart that have to do more with relationships. And so what we're going to focus on here today is what's called the Descendant. This is one of the 4 angles in astrology, and I'm going to show you this in a fictitious chart that I pulled up here. And I'm going to share the screen, and this will be with my software, and you can see this chart. And let's see, we will stop this share, and we'll do this share. Awesome. All right. So this is the chart of fictitious Kareem, and I put the birth date here, 6/25/83 in Atlanta. And what I want to start with today is to just show you what I mean by the Descendant. And I think this is helpful. Some people are visual learners, and so I want to make sure that you're receiving that knowledge here. And you've probably heard of the Ascendant or the rising sign, which is right here, the AS here. And this is the DS, the Descendant. So the rising sign is our outer mask, our outer personality, what we're known for. It's the energy that people can receive from us. It's just automatic and instinctual in us. Whereas the Descendant, the opposite point, represents others, partners, collaborators, lovers, people we attract, energies we attract. The 2 other angles in astrology, very significant, are the midheaven, the MC, medium coli, and the IC, the mum coli. This is like the opposite of where the top of the sky would be, or where the midday that day would be. So this is the career point. This is the home point. And in astrology, these are known as 4 angles. And then in astrocartography, these are known as the places of the chart that are most pregnant with potential for dynamic energy in our life. So if there's a planet, there's a part of our soul that's hanging out on one of these angles, it's really going to be a dominant theme in our life in that location. Now, some locations might have a few of these, some might have none. What we're really concerned with around relationships is if there are planets on this angle of partnership, as we said, called the Descendant. And just so you know, if you're looking at this chart, I'm using something called whole sign houses. This is Libra rising, so the whole first house is Libra, the whole last 7th house is Aries. Okay, so just for those who are a little bit more technical, but as we go through, you're going to see that what we're talking about are planets on the angles. And I'm going to just show you this with this fictitious chart as well. And so there is, this is the US, and Georgia's here, and you're going to see that there aren't any planets anywhere on the angle of partnership, except over here. This is Juno. And I'll come to Juno in a bit. But I want to, as I walk you through some of these meanings, I'm going to go through every planet on the angle of partnership. And we're going to see how different planets will attract different kinds of people, different kinds of relationships, different kinds of partnerships, professional and love related. And so I'll kind of show you these as we walk through some of the descriptions here. And I want to make sure that you understand both the sort of, highlights of like the best potentials of these planets, as also, the shadows or the challenges or the difficulties that having that planet on the angle of partnership might bring. So if we start with the sun, if the sun is on the angle of partnership, which is what's happening here. So if Kareem was like, I'm going to Prague, what's going on there? And I said, well, you might very much attract very significant partners here because the sun is on the angle of partnership. Now, the sun is our life force. It's our creativity. And so it's going to radiate a lot of energy into partnerships. So you could see that this might be the dominant theme in Kareem's life here or your life here, that you're going to express yourself through the relationships. Now, this could be very successful in terms of building business relationships. You can be very confident in your relationships, very charismatic. You can kind of be a leader within a certain group of relationships. So there's a shining potential, there's a radiant potential, but it's built on who you know, right? Now, there can be a challenge here, which is, that maybe certain egos are competing for the limelight, there could be kind of pride that blinds us. And so we have to be careful of that on any sun line. But it also could mean, in terms of the challenge, that too much of our energy is kind of dependent on the other. And, that could wrap us up too much in others' affairs. So we have to be careful with that. But overall, this is a line that can bring partners. Doesn't necessarily mean a lover, but we do see that sometimes the stronger potential is to find a male partner on this line, because the sun is a masculine symbol. We'll also see that with the planet Mars. So if you're looking for a masculine partner, this could be a beneficial line. Okay, now there's something really important to say, which is that then we have to do a lot more interpretation, right? Because maybe your sun is squaring Saturn or Pluto, or, it has some other challenges to it. And those would come up stronger if we're emphasizing the sun being right on the angle of partnership. So that's an important point with locational astrology, is that you take the aspects or the story in your chart and you bring it with that planetary line wherever that planet is very strong. So nothing is taken out of context. It's not just like, go to this, line on the angle of partnership and you're going to attract a lover. It's like, well, what kind of lover? What kind of love or relationship situations will come in? And that's where we need to sit and actually look at your chart. And that's why you can't really interpret this online, because it needs the nuances and the subtleties of actually reading your entire chart. So if you move into the moon line, okay, and the moon is right over here in the middle of the ocean, right? It's say Fiji, right? Let's say if Kareem went to Fiji, then we'd have, again, a lot of emotional energy connected to partnerships. And this can obviously attract in relationships into our life. It means that we're very sensitive to the other people in our life. Connections are very important to us on a deeper, intimate, emotional level. It's not so much like I'm going to shine through them like with the sun. It's more like I'm really feeling into the people that I'm connected with here. and I feel maybe a strong emotional resonance with them, an empathic bondedness with them. And there's like a shared sense of nurturing, it's kind of like a familial connection. Now, that can be very beautiful, but it also can create codependency. And this would be one of the shadows of the moon on the angle of partnership. Emotional conflicts, emotional storms can come up through a significant relationship there. It just means that, it's not career that's bringing us the most emotional ups and downs, or it's maybe not children, or it's maybe not the community. It's maybe a significant partner, right? So this would be very important to not become too dependent on another for our emotional comfort or our emotional sense of balance, and that we really have to keep a certain modicum of self-reliance when we have the moon on the angle of partnership. So being a little careful with how sensitive we can be to others, that's something to be careful of with the moon on the angle of partnership. So moving over to the next planet would be Mercury. And I'm just doing these in planetary order. And let's say, Kareem's like really interested in, building some business relationships, having a lot of, trade negotiations, a lot of idea sharing. Maybe he wants to do a startup. Maybe he's working in the field of technology. You might really want to go to where Mercury is on the angle of partnership. You're going to have, so this could be London, might even be like Copenhagen, a little bit, right? Stockholm, but much stronger in England. And so Mercury is the planet of communication, the throat chakra, we say, ideas, communication, but information sharing is happening through relationships. Now, could this bring in a lover? It could. It suggests that it may be a more mental type of connection, but if Mercury is in a water sign, it might be a very emotional type of lover connection. But it emphasizes more mental stimulus, engaging dialogues, sharing ideas, very stimulating environments that we want to put ourselves in with Mercury on the angle of partnership. But could there be a challenge? Yeah, it could be intellectual challenges, idea challenges, right? Like my idea versus yours, right? Or a communication challenge, like an argument, misunderstandings, right? So we have to become and embrace more patience, more open-mindedness, more tolerance with different perspectives. Sometimes this could show up. I've seen this where language could become an issue. So let's say a person, let's say he wanted to go to Galicia, right here in the Spanish northwestern coast, and doesn't speak the dialect there, and the Spanish is difficult for him, and it's because it's the Basque, or it's the northern region there. That could become really challenging. So the Mercury issue of information, but also, can I understand you, could be an issue in relationships, right? So this is Mercury on the angle of partnership. Now, one of the best lines for love relationships typically is Venus on the angle of partnership, because Venus is a ruler of relationships. She's the goddess of love, harmony. She's the goddess of beauty, right? So she's naturally the governess of relationship. And especially if we want to attract in female partners, this can be one of the better locations. Right? So if I'm looking, that might be the first thing that I'm looking at if somebody really wants to find a love relationship. Now, it's not the only thing. There's many, many factors. But in this case, he's probably not going to go to, this part of Saudi or maybe Sudan. But if he's interested in going to Cape Town, this line goes right through Cape Town. And so, maybe that wasn't on his radar before, right? And that's the cool thing with astrolocality, is sometimes it's places that you never thought, or you maybe had a hint in your soul. And then suddenly you're like, whoa, this could be a love relationship area. And I know I have many stories of this myself, also with Venus lines. in Portugal and Spain and places that I've attracted relationships. So this could also bring artistic collaborations into our life, goddess of beauty, but definitely pleasure, aesthetics. Is there a challenge with this? Well, maybe too many social connections. I've seen that in my own life on a Venus line. And so it's like, we almost feel like we have to be very social. We have to be networking all the time or going to all these events. And, we're looking at Facebook events all the time and it becomes overwhelming. Also, maybe there's sometimes vanity that comes up in relationships, or just like the people that we know, like, do I look the part? Am I trendy or hip enough? Like, am I playing the role? Because we're attracting Venus types of people. So Aphrodite people. So, like, are we like cool enough, basically? So, being careful with not too many like surface level relationships or just too many as a whole. Too many can also come up with Jupiter, which I'll just jump to right now before going to Mars. Jupiter is also one of the best lines typically for attracting very expansive and inspiring and opportunistic types of relationships where we can grow through those partnerships. They have described this line, Jim Lewis, who was the founder of AstroCartography, spoke about Jupiter on the angle of partnership as kind of attracting in the benefactors, right? Like, it's like we're a prince in a foreign land and we're suddenly very honored there, right? And it's like we didn't have to do anything but just walk in the door, right? And like if Kareem went to Beijing, he might feel this, right? Or even the whole island of Taiwan. So, some of the Philippines, right? So it also could be a line where we could attract spiritually uplifting people in our life, teachers, gurus, wisdom keepers, wisdom traditions. So we tend to love Jupiter. We tend to love Jupiter lines. Of course, we can be too confident on Jupiter lines. And so we might be, again, having too many relationships that we can't like follow through in. We might be like indulging in partnerships. We might be overly optimistic, right? And maybe expect a bit much, or just kind of become complacent there, whereas like we wouldn't do that if Saturn was there. We would do a lot of hard work in our relationship. So we might not be so practical. We might just be like living large. So this could be, again, like if you're a digital nomad, you might be like traveling with a partner here and spending lots of money and like, just like, oh, it's cheap here and we're just going to like, play around a lot. And that can be fun, but you might kind of just go after one adventure after another, right? And you could also do that with like one partner after another. So even though Jupiter is known as the great benefic planet, the most sort of positive that we tend to experience, every planet has a challenge, right? And even when we talk about Mars, so let's say that Kareem wanted to go to Spain and he's really interested in studying flamenco. And I noticed that there's this Mars line here, right? This is Mars on the angle of partnership. And this is very much like flamenco. This is a planetary line and a place in the world where you would experience a lot of passion, a lot of spice, very hot energy in terms of relationships. And so Mars is the god of war, god of fire, right? And so, this is going to be very dynamic in terms of partnerships. There can definitely be conflict, confrontation, friction. You don't typically want to have the god of war in the area of partnership, right? Now, how can we work with this? Well, yes, this can bring in more sexual relationships, more passion. So you'd want to have a really conscious sexual relationship on this line. But you also would want to have more of an adventurous or very healthy competitive type of relationship. How would you do that? Well, you might be in a work relationship where you're pushing each other to excel, and you're working hard together towards that goal. In a love relationship, you would really want to be physical together. You'd want to hike or go on adventures or be, having a way that you can kind of compete with each other, and you would need to prepare for some conflicts between each other. So it's typically quite a challenging area for relationships. So we need to be careful with being too aggressive with that Mars, and finding a goal in relationship that we can work on together. That's what I would recommend to Kareem if he was going to Spain or parts of southern France, etc. Here. Now, if you look at another really challenging planet, it's Saturn. Now, Saturn can be very constructive on the angle of partnership, because, and actually for him, Saturn and Pluto are here, like in Bangladesh. But we would say that Saturn lines in relationship can attract in people that are more Saturnian, more serious, more about commitments, more about hard work and discipline. And these could be more relationships that are enduring, that have some stability or foundation to them, which can be a really positive thing. They can be about commitment and relationships that can mature over time. So some people ask me, like, where could I find a partner for the rest of my life? And we might want to look at where Saturn is on the angle of partnership, as opposed to Mars, let's say, like we were talking about, might be like a one-night stand with Mars, which could be very fun, and then we're done. But with Saturn, we don't have one-night stands. We might have a wall, actually. We might have a block. And that's the challenge of Saturn, is that we might feel a little bit like rigid or confined, or might have others that we attract that are not so open with us right away. They may open over time. There's a kind of restriction or a more controlled nature with who we're encountering. And that's why these places can be very good for business relationships, because we can have more of a sense of, what are we building together? What are we constructing? This is a very Saturn word. And, what would we like to grow over time? Not sort of that Jupiterian, like instant growth and like, oh, the possibilities. It's more like, okay, like if we strategize together, we can build this out over the next 7 years, or 7 years having to be a Saturn cycle of a square. So think about that with Saturn. And let's contrast that with Uranus. Uranus is the planet that represents breakthroughs, new levels of consciousness, awakenings, epiphanies. And these happen instantly, right? And that's kind of what Uranus is like in the area of relationships. It's someone that can show up and just kind of disrupt our whole worldview, and kind of like a lightning bolt, right? And this can be instantaneously falling in love, right? And it can be kind of like a falling, because you can be shocked into love here. It can be like so fast, it's so quick that you can be almost traumatized by how quickly things are moving. And that could be, they come in and they come out, right? It's like an electric bolt, right? Uranus is like electricity coming into our life. So there's something that suddenly appears, and it can be quite novel. It could be something new. It could be a new type of relating. Maybe it's like open relationship models, or, maybe you even meet like a couple and you're like interested in both people in the couple, something like that. It could also be that you just, on that line where Uranus is on the angle of partnership, you want to have a lot of freedom. And so you're like, Maybe you have a bunch of different partners and you're at different depths with different partners and completely different kinds of relationships with different partners. So it's much more experimental relating. You see how different that would be than Saturn, which is, here's the rules of engagement. Here's, our commitment agreements, right? Saturn lines, it's almost like we're married at the very beginning. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. Uranus doesn't like any rules at all. And again, change can happen suddenly. So it's very unpredictable with Uranus, but it's very exciting. And if we want to maybe attract younger partners or something really new and fun and playful, this could be a really great place. We just wouldn't want to expect a lot there. Now, if we go to Neptune, this is also really important to look at our expectations, because Neptune on the angle of partnership, let's see if we can find that here. There's Uranus for our friend Kareem. Yeah, the Solomon Islands, let's say this Kareem went here, and it'd be like, could be, again, this very romantic experience. I guess this would happen in the Northern Island of New Zealand, and you're in like a paradise with someone. You're in a movie, a Hollywood film, and it's literally like you're attracting the mermaid or the merman. It's very magical. It's very mystical. It's very spiritual. It's very dreamy. It's like you're living the myth. And that's very important because it's hard to sustain that kind of fantasy. And so we tend to have a lot of ideals if Neptune is on the angle of partnership. And we can see the partner through rose-colored glasses. And so we have to beware of sacrificing ourselves to an ideal and maybe like victimizing ourselves even of like what could be with this person, right? And sometimes that means that we attract people that have some addictive behavior. Maybe they act a different way, a way that we really like when they're high on something, right? Whether that's drugs or alcohol or surfing or anything, right? It could be anything that could be where there's sort of this like, it's almost too idyllic, too perfect. And so we have to be more discerning then, right? Now, this could be a line where we really could attract a very, very, very spiritual relationship and a very unifying, soul-blending, beautiful partnership that can emphasize, again, mysticism, compassion. Maybe we go to a yoga retreat and we hit these exalted states of consciousness, and we do that and we meet somebody there and we just are like super aligned, and yeah, this could be that magical, and it could be a long-term sustaining relationship, but we have to also get real, right? And maybe if we both go back to, the US after being on, Fiji or something like that, we might need to have reality checks, right? And make sure that we're not too much in a fantasy with this line. So that would be Neptune on the angle of partnership. Now, Pluto, which we saw over here, Pluto, this is one of the lines that we need to be very careful of on the angle of partnership, because Pluto is known as the force of transformation and evolution in our life. Now that sounds like, okay, I'm ready, but it often brings a lot of upheaval and intensity and drama into our life. And, when Pluto's on the angle of partnership, then it can bring in situations that are very complex, very psychologically layered and entangled. Often this shows up as, attracting someone who might already have a partner. There may be power struggles or control issues in the relationship. There may be like the shadows that we really have to process deeply in partnership. It could be about money. It could be jealousy, manipulation. So this is usually a difficult line for relationships. Now, it could be really great if we're doing shamanic work, if we're doing therapeutic work, maybe we're going on a shamanic retreat somewhere and Pluto's on the angle of partnership. Okay. But there still might be some different agendas going on there. So we want to be a little careful and make sure that we're very clear about like how deeply we're letting people in, and not to be paranoid, but Pluto can bring paranoia. So we want to know that this line can promote deep investigation into our soul, that we can attract very powerful people, very influential, very impactful people here. So this could also be a place where, like, if there's a business conference, you could attract people that might really like exponentially increase your influence just by knowing them, right? It can be amazing. Just also being sensitive to that this is a pretty intense energy, right? And it's profound energy. These are not surface types of relationships. Now, I've also seen with clients that these lines of Pluto could attract in criminal energies, darker energies. I've seen people where they have lost money or there's been theft on these lines because Pluto is the god of the underworld. So we can attract underworld characters. So this would be Pluto on the angle of partnership. Now, I want to talk to you about just three more symbols before we end today. And one of them is Juno, which we saw for Kareem back in Georgia, where he was born. And Juno is an asteroid that I work with, and specifically, she's about relationships. Specifically, she's about soul contracts. And what I mean is conditional relationships. So if Juno is on the angle of partnership, you will definitely attract intimate, bonded, deep, connected relationships. Usually there's a sense of the theme of fairness, equality, and the balance in relationship that comes up. I'll do this for you, you do this for me. Negotiation, right? All of that can be, and this could be in business, it could be in love. They're in intense, intimate, contractual type of relationships. And sometimes I've seen this as like we've known each other before, right? Like these are soul level partnerships. But there's often this theme of fairness that comes up. And Juno was the wife of Jupiter, and she can definitely bring someone that can instantly feel like husband or wife, or that we marry. So this could be a very significant line. Not all astrologers work with Juno. She's very strong for me in my practice. And I recommend working with Juno in all your relationship work. Then there's also Chiron. Chiron is known as the wounded healer and the shaman, the medicine person, the mentor, and also the coach and the guide. So that means we can attract those types of people if Chiron is on the angle of partnership. So, a lot of us are in that role of coaching or mentoring. And let's say we want to go to a business conference with other coaches. This could be a great line to go to if you can find a conference like that. It can also be a great place to go on retreat. And if you're in a personal relationship, or most relationships that you will attract here, there will be a person there or many people there that may reveal your deepest wounds. And it's going to kind of compel you or force you to do some deep healing work. This is not easy. So this is the kind of line where you need to do the work, right? And you're going to work with that dynamic in relationship, and you have to be careful to not make one person the healer, one person who was the victim, and kind of play with that, or the martyr, play with that dynamic. And instead that both partners would be committed to healing work. Because there are old wounds and insecurities, and then we can go deeper into the wound, or we can really work on healing and actually like understanding the greater purpose of that story and that wound as part of our service here, right? This may even be a kind of place where you get into like relationship healing as maybe even part of your your professional life in some way. Not necessarily, but it could be something that comes up for you. But this is a place where you need to mend and nurture the wounded parts of your soul through those relationships. Lastly, there are the nodes of the moon, which are very, very significant. There's the north and south node. And the symbol I want to show you because it looks like a horseshoe. This is the north node. The south node is shaped the other way. And so in Paris, in Brussels, this is where Kareem has the north node on the angle of partnership. The north node is known as the dragon's head, and it's a symbol of increase or growth in this lifetime. So this would suggest that this is a place where there are very important destined or soul contract relationships. How is it different than Juno? Well, these North Node contacts feel like they're kind of shaping our soul's evolution and teaching us more profound life lessons. There's definitely opportunities for growth and increase where the North Node is. So if it's on the angle of partnership, we can attract a lover, romantic relationships, business partnerships, a community of connections with people. But if the North Node is on the angle of the self or the ascendant, and the South Node is on the angle of partnership, now this is a sense of very strongly feeling like we've known people here before. And there's some kind of karmic debt with these relationships. So if you're on a nodal location like this, you can bet that there's a feeling of there's some kind of karmic reciprocity going on here. And we have to be careful to not, we could become dependent, or we could expect a lot from certain relationships here. And we do have to look at any soul stories that are kind of repeating. And this also could bring up, again, the need for healing. And sometimes this feels like a place where maybe we've lived in this place in other lifetimes. It can feel like that, or at least the people we know have that kind of soul resonance for us. So these are very important locations for relationships. Not easy, but there's a sense of, with the South Node, that we're completing certain karma. And with the North Node, there's something increasing or growing for us in this location. All right. Well, that's been a lot today. And I hope that this has been interesting, exciting, opening for you, an innovative way to explore the idea of relocating to find relationship, romance, partnership, love, sexuality in different parts of the world, and how different planets will represent these different kinds of relationships in your life. Before I end today, I want to give you another idea to play with, which is known as cyclocartography. And I do this with most of my readings. I'm looking at where you are on the planet, but also when you go there. So for instance, everything that I talked about today, there will be planets that will be on the angle of partnership in that part of the world for a certain amount of time. And depending on the speed of the planet, the longer the planet will be on that angle. So if we were just talking about Pluto can be on an angle, like the angle of relationship, for about 3 years, like moving back and forth, right? So this becomes very important, right? If you go to that location where Pluto is on the angle of partnership during that 3-year cycle, whoa, you're going to attract in a very intense, very passionate, very deep, profound relationship that might not always be in that location, but is there for that time, right? Now, maybe you only go somewhere for a month, right? And then we could want to look at, hey, are there any planets on the angle of partnership there for that month? And we could look at things like the Sun or Venus or Mercury, right? And if you are wanting to be really strategic with when you go somewhere to find partnership and you have that flexibility, this could be really fun to explore. And I've seen this in my own life. and clients as well. So, but those are faster transits. With Venus, it could be just for, like a week. With Jupiter, it could be for a month or a little bit more than that. So this could be very, very significant. And the same idea could apply for career as well. So this is something we explore in other videos. In addition, we're going to look at other topics in relocation astrology, such as why everyone should look at their relocated chart, because most of us don't live where we were born. So we're actually living out the chart of where we are now. So I hope you'll tune in to some other relocation videos. If you like this video, please put your thumbs up, subscribe, share it. And if you'd like to do an astrolocality or astrocartography session, that's been my niche since 2006. I'd love to support you finding your power places around the world. This has been VerDarLuz from the Practical Esoteric and Divine Timing Coaching.com. All the best. We'll see you in another locational astrology video.